Hello, everybody. Welcome to this beautiful Sunday evening in Florida. We are working on a 2004 Hyundai Santa Fe 3.5 liter GLS. We were talking about the power steering leak issue. As you know, in my last video, we talked about how we had to replace the power steering pump due to the fact it was damaged. It was making grinding, chattering noises, and it started leaking fluid. I would say 2 days before we had to replace it. Power steering pump was going bad a year ago, and it had a light chatter and noise. We thought it was a motor mount or something, or the belt tensioner, and because the motor mounts were bad, and we thought because we might have been leaning, we might have think it might have just been had motor mount problems, but it wasn't. But a year later, after the pump decided it wanted to get louder and louder, it decided to lose tons more fluid within like 3 days before we had to replace it. But anyway, we are going to talk about the hoses. And what the problem is with these hoses is that this is what we did. My wife kept having a major freaking leak. It has to put fluid in it every day. It drops all the way down to like right here. So the funny thing is that every time it leaks fluid, it always stops like right down here a little bit. But it's always leveled out. So I unplugged everything, took this out, cleaned it out, fill this up with water and whatever, make sure it's completely cleaned out, and check and see if there was any leaks or any holes. Nothing was leaking out besides out of the two nipple holes like fluid should go through. But there's two little nipples on the bottom of this thing that holds into the rubber pieces that holds this on this power steering bracket. And I seen a little hole that looked like it was a little abnormal, but it wasn't leaking any water or any fluid out. So I thought that might have been a problem, because every time it was leaking all down here and below, all over the motor mount. And you can see it was like a light bluish color deterioration, and it was over the top of the motor mount itself. So we thought that maybe this was either leaking or maybe it was the two hoses. So I did notice that I cut this hose before because it looked like it had a cut on the end of it where it was clamped on. So I cut it off and put two new clamps on it, and tied them down as tight as I can get them. And these were Phillips. And this one is not showing any signs of any wet debris or any fluid or anything dripping from it. The only thing I didn't like about this one is that it slides on and off too easy, so I was assuming it was stretched out. So that's when I cut it off and replaced it with two clamps to hold it tighter, because usually that solves the problem. But there was no holes in this line, and it goes all the way back to the top of the pump, which is a pain in the ass replacement, because you gotta have long needle nose pliers to get down there to actually get it. And it takes a little bit, and it's best to wear gloves when you do it. But we didn't have to go through that, because this hose we thought it was only leaking here because it was wet before. So I checked this hose, which runs all the way down to your power steering cooler, and I thought it might have been the problem. The only difference with this one is that this one actually was very hard, which means it wasn't easy to slide off, so I knew it was on there pretty tight. So we took the old clamp off. I verified this hose all the way down to like halfway down to there. Did not see any holes or anything leaking out of it. So I cut this one as well, just to be sure the end of it wasn't stretched out. Maybe I was assuming that maybe the hose might have been squirting fluid out of one of these, and it was causing to leak to only be in the middle. So I took both. So I put two new Phillips head clamps, tightened down as hard as I can, and all the way up to the edge, where the nipple actually stops and ends. And I'm going to drive it later and see how it works. It takes 20 to 30 minute drive for it to start leaking. But it's weird because this vehicle will not do it when you're at idle or turning the steering wheel left and right. It won't do it unless you're driving down the road, I guess, due to pressure. So I did view all the way from here down to here, and noticed that I was looking all the way down there earlier, it was completely dry. So I would squeeze the hose when it was running to see if anything would squirt out, and nothing would squirt out. The only reason why it's wet now, because I took a hose and washed off all the power steering fluid, and took some baby wipes and wiped off all these hoses nice and clean so they're not greasy. So what if it does leak again? Hopefully I could find a better example in which hose it actually is. But I also did notice these hoses usually have a styrofoam cover protector over it. When I took it off to see, there was tons of black, dark black grease, like from a couple. Feel like it was like a couple of days old. So I went halfway down. It was covered in freaking wet fluid and a little bit of mixture of black grease. My finger was black, like black, and it was somewhat still a little fresh, but it was also dried up. So I was assuming that this hose might be the problem. And this hose is very easy to take off because it only goes down to the bottom to where the frame is. So if this solves it, if this solves it and it doesn't leak anymore, then I know that this hose is probably stretched out, and it could be squirting out here, and it's probably dripping down. Because I did notice that it only leaks straight down. It gets on the bottom of the pulleys. It only goes straight down to where the brand new AC compressor is, and it leaks all on top of the blinker bulb because it does end up staying right here in this area here only. It doesn't go up here. It doesn't go all over here. It just goes straight down, and it just drills. But when you're driving down the road, all that wind just sprays all that fluid sometimes. But it only leaks down to the bottom of the actual frame of the car as well, but it doesn't flow anywhere else. It's just particularly in this area here. So hopefully later on today I will make a part 2 video on this power steering leak on this car. But please keep in mind, when I did change this out, the hoses were not bad, but I should have replaced the hoses all at once because it usually solves the problem, but it doesn't. But just a recommendation, if you do change out your power steering pump, always change this out and change out your hoses. The metal hose is not leaking, period. So it was never wet, never had any problems, and it doesn't leak from below. Like I said, it's only right here. So I did find one of these for $28 brand new. It's an aftermarket, only one type and one brand. Amazon doesn't carry it. They only carry these reservoir containers only for the 2.7 and the 3.3 liter only. eBay only carries one of these for the 3.5, and the rest are for 2.7 and 3.3. 3.5s are so hard to get these things for. I found a few of these on Amazon for the 3.5 liter, but they cost $130. I got this one from the junkyard because at the time the original one broke because the hose broke off with the nipple. And finding one of these junkyard was very, very hard. And it didn't have a motor in it, but it had this, and luckily it was already taken apart. But the chance was to get the dry rotted hose off wasn't going to be easy, but that's why I took a knife with me and cut it off by the edge, so I know it would come off without breaking the nipple, without any type of lubrication like Windex or hot water and soap. But I know this doesn't leak because it's always dry up here. Now, if you don't, I use a funnel to put power steering fluid in here, so I know it doesn't leave any trails of any wet mess. But I was gonna try to put some blue tape on one of these hoses, but blue tape doesn't stick very well to identify that's where the leak is. But usually where all the grease and all the wet fluid is at is usually where the leak is happening. And like I said, it happens between these two hoses. So we'll see what happens later on with this after this test drive, and I will certainly get back to y'all. Hopefully this video helps on the power steering leak on the 2004 Hyundai Santa Fe 3.5 liter engine GLS model. And y'all have a great one.